So if you're starting a business and trying to come up with a business name and you're not really sure how to do that or what's appropriate or what's going to work well, I'm going to go over some information and some tips here to help you choose a business name. Now, for starters, as always, I'm just speaking generally here. Things could vary a little bit from country to country, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I'm kind of just speaking from the perspective of someone in Canada, and it's probably similar in most other countries, most jurisdictions, but always check with your local, corporate registry or business registry or whatever rules you have in your region. So the first thing is the criteria of the business name. And now this will vary a little bit depending on the type of business you start up. And by that, I mean the legal structure. So are you setting your business up as a sole proprietorship, a partnership, a limited liability partnership, a corporation, a cooperative? There are different types of legal structures for businesses. The most common ones would be the sole proprietorship and a corporation, and then partnership can be fairly common as well. But so the criteria that you need for a business name for those main types of legal structures would be two things. To start out with, the first one would be the business name needs to be distinctive. So by distinctive, it needs to have a word that separates it and distinguishes it from other businesses. So that could typically be could be your last name, could be a name you came up with, could be a word that's suitable for your business. So something that would set it apart from another business in the same industry. So if you're starting a plumbing company, what's going to set it apart from other plumbing companies. So that first word has to distinguish it. The second criteria would be descriptive. So the business name needs to be descriptive, which means it describes which type of business it is. So in that case of a plumbing company, then you'd want your distinctive and descriptive probably being plumbing, So it could be like North Star Plumbing, where you have North Star is the distinctive that sets it apart from other plumbing companies. And then you have plumbing, which is descriptive, describing the type of business. So North Star Plumbing, that would meet those two criteria. And now the third criteria, and this depends on the legal structure, typically only when you incorporate do you have to have this criteria, and that would be a corporate legal ending. So think of businesses that end in LTD, that's short for limited, or Inc., that's short for incorporated, or Corp, short for corporation. So when you incorporate, typically you're going to have to choose one of those legal endings, and it can be the full ending or the abbreviated form, and you can only use those if you're incorporated. Again, this might vary a little bit region to region, but that's the standard rule. So that's the first part, is making sure that you follow the proper criteria. Otherwise, when you go to register the business with your local corporate registry or business registry, they might deny you. And one other option to add for corporations, if you don't really want to choose a business name, you could just have a numbered corporation name. Like I live in the province of Saskatchewan in Canada. So if you wanted, you could just register your corporation under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Saskatchewan LTD. So, or Canada LTD, or your state or your region. So that's an option as well. Now, one other important thing to check for would be to make sure there's no trademark on the name, or at least a trademark that might interfere with you using that business name. So you can go online and do a trademark search. Depending on which country you're in, there should be a database for that. And I generally recommend that because you don't want to go and register a business in your province, in your state, under a business name that's maybe available there, later to find out that someone has a trademark on it, internationally or nationally, and then you get a letter saying you can't use that business name anymore. So that's a good idea. You can also just search online and see if there are businesses, somewhere in your country, or just see what kind of online presence there is for that business, because you don't really want to be using the same business name as someone else, especially if they have a trademark on it, and especially if they're in the same region as you. If they're in a totally different country and they don't have a trademark, especially if they're not operating internationally, like with a plumbing company, for example, probably not a big issue. But there are some businesses that can serve clients around the world, and maybe they have a trademark, so you wouldn't want to use the same business name as them. And now, just to add a few tips and personal preferences here, I do not recommend in most cases using your last name. In some ways that might make sense if the business is super tied to you, but just think if you're ever looking for business partners or willing to sell the business, chances are the new owners probably won't want to take on your last name to represent their business. So keep that in mind. I usually don't recommend it. I also really don't like that for accounting firms and law firms. It seems to be super common where a law firm will just use 3 last names of the partners. And, a lot of the, bigger accounting firms and law firms that started with partners' last names, those partners are long gone. And so now instead of using the partner names, they're just KPMG, or MNP, things like that. So to me, MNP is not a good business name. And it's just because they've used the initials of the initial partners. Those partners probably aren't alive anymore, so not a good idea in my opinion, just my personal preference. I think it's not a good way to name a business. Totally up to you though. Another tip would be probably don't use something that's really hard to spell or change the spelling on an existing word. You might just find that people are getting it wrong a lot, and maybe that's not a big deal in some contexts, but if people are writing you checks or sending you invoices or kind of filling out more formal documents, it could become an issue where they're often misspelling your business name. So something to be mindful of as well. And then just a couple more personal preferences here before I wrap up. One I don't like is when people just combine 2 names. Like, they take the first name of 2 partners or the names of the 2 regions that they're from or most familiar with and just kind of combine them. To me, that's kind of lacking creativity and often doesn't sound good. Again, totally up to you, just my personal preference. And then the final one is words that are really just kind of cliche or overused, like thrive or elevate. I find there are a lot of businesses that just use that word as their distinctive, for different industries, thrive and elevate. And I don't know, just for me, they're overused and they're kind of lame, to be honest with you. But, I don't want to steer anyone in a certain direction, kind of just sharing some of my preferences. But anyways, that's the often necessary criteria, and then just some extra input for you if you're trying to come up with a business name. Hopefully that was helpful. If you liked the video, please click like, and you can check out my channel here on YouTube, where I have well over 100 videos now on business startup and business management. If you have a question, you can leave that in the comment section below. And if you want to book a free one-on-one consultation with myself for business startup or business management consulting, you can do that, and I will leave a link in the video description below.